Hello everyone, welcome back to Fanblade. It's episode 5 of the base 6. Can you believe we made it to 5 episodes? Good grief. Hot on the heels of the last video, and in fact I'm filming this about 6 minutes after signing off the last one because there really is no time to waste here. We're going to install the electronics, and there's quite a lot to talk about, and I can't really start talking about it without addressing some of the comments I got in the first video from people who want to talk about electronics. Well, here we go. So firstly, Kurt Shade, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your surname, sir. He wants a deep dive on the electronics. Now, that's exactly what's going to happen, but I asked him specifically if there was anything that he was having trouble with and that he wanted me to focus on, and he said blend knobs. He has a lot of trouble figuring out all the little tiny wires that make them work. So, yes, there is a blend knob going in there. That will come up in due course. Then, cartilage head. Great name, by the way. They came in with a lot of great information about how the original base 6 pickups were basically just Jaguar pickups. Fascinating to read about. Thank you for that information. It's all really good. But then the big man himself, Peter Stephen, weighed in with some very good suggestions. And I'm actually going to put a link in the description to Peter Stephen's website because I talk about him on here quite a lot. It would be excellent if you could go and check out the calibre of this man's work. Actually, I should probably ask if he'd be keen for an interview, because it might be nice to have a proper luthier on this channel for once. Anyway, he had some very cool things that he'd observed about these pickups that I'm going to use. Peter says this. He says, I have an observation about those Funder wide-range humbuckers that you showed briefly. Those pickups have visible pole pieces reminiscent of the precision humbucking domino set. In fact, within the cover, the other 3 poles are lurking. He is, of course, completely correct. They're right here. I bet that the hidden poles could be removed because they're threaded, and you can see where these 3 are poking through the cover, and the ones that are recessed are sticking out, and we have visible threads. Peter continues, I bet that the hidden poles could be removed, thereby reducing the inductance and making each coil responsible for only 3 strings and giving a response with a brighter single coil sound while still noise cancelling, not unlike the famous P pickup. Well, if ever there was a comment that was going to get my attention, that's it. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm simply going to desolder a couple of spots on the back, and then you can pull the cover off, take the pole pieces out. We'll get to have a look inside it, which is kind of neat, and then pop the cover back on, and all it means in practical terms is that the string is only going over one pole piece. It's only getting picked up by one of the coils, and that's going to negate the original plan that I had for coil split switch and a phase switch and a bunch of other crazy things. Like, I just don't need any of that anymore. Blend knobs, all it's going to take. So, I've found my solder sucker. Let's do this. Well, that was slightly more of a hassle than I was prepared for. I just couldn't seem to get that last little bit out. The solder sucker couldn't reach it. Even the solder braid just wouldn't seem to soak up like solder braid normally does. So I just had to get a little bit brutal and bust out the grinder. So, yeah. Job done. Now, just to make sure that I didn't damage anything, I did actually measure these. They are designated neck and bridge. There's little stamps on the back there. The bridge measured just short of 16k, and the neck measured just over 8k. And I thought, that's interesting. Have I damaged a coil? Well, I mean, obviously not, because they're wired in series, but I wondered if they'd done something tricky, wired them in parallel, and then I just cut one of the coils by mistake. But I weighed them. That one's 73 grams, that one's 42 grams. So, yes, there is physically less copper in this one, that one being in the bridge. Oh man, we're going to have a mighty powerful bridge. It's gonna be brutal. Incidentally, the bridge pickup is located exactly where it would be on a jazz bass. So that's all good. They've both survived that process. Let's clean the wax off them, and then I can assemble them with their pickup rings, and we can drop them into the bass. There's enough movement side to side there that I'm a little bit worried about just bolting these straight down. I think I want to put the neck and the bridge on first, that way I can run a couple of strings up and just make sure I get that just in the right place. Because to have it a few millimeters off centre would be really, really bad. It's always the little things that catch you out. So everything's lined up. I've got all the holes where I want them. Turns out that I just had to push those both pretty much as far that way as they would go, and that's lined them up nicely. But the screws that I've got are too big to go through the holes in the pickup rings. So now I have to take all of this apart. Oh well. Alright, we're just getting ready to wire this thing up, but we've got to talk about pots. Now, I did get a question specifically about blend pots, and I'll get to that in a second, but one of the ways of understanding how these work is to try and understand how a normal one works. Now, I am blessed with a big pile of these, which I'm probably never going to use. This is one of them. So, let's actually open this thing up and take a look inside. So this is what the inside of a potentiometer looks like. I've just stuck it in a block of plywood simply because filming things this small gets a little bit fiddly, but I'll do my best. We have 3 pins. Now, the outer two pins are connected via a sort of a not quite complete circle of black resistive material. You can see it printed on the PCB. It's this little black line around the outside here. Now, that's it's like a carbon composite, but it's resistive. And as you turn the knob, this little dimple here, this little indentation here, that's riding on the resistive material. Now, that is connected to the central pin. So by turning the knob, you can increase or decrease the amount of resistance between these two pins, and that's very, very useful. I actually did a couple of experiments just to see if I could get away with this, whereby I used a pot exactly like this one as a blend knob, by putting one pickup in there, and then the output was coming out the centre. And it's like it kind of worked. When the wiper was right in the middle there, it was successfully blending both pots. But, crucially, I had introduced resistance on both sides, and both pickups may have been blended together nicely, but they were both at half volume. So no, it doesn't really work. So that's when you need a proper blend pot. And I'm not going to take this one apart, but I am going to draw it out so that you can see exactly what's going on both of those PCBs, because it's pretty simple, really. Inside what I am going to call a standard potentiometer, we have 3 lugs, a little horseshoe of resistive material, and then the wiper goes into the centre, and that of course connects across those two and sweeps around. Now, in a blend knob, you've got a very slight variation on this, in that you've got 3 lugs. The centre one is going to the centre, into the wiper, but then you've got resistive material up to halfway. And at that point, you have just a straight contact. I have drawn that really badly, but that's for one of them, and then of course the other one, because there's 2 of them in there, the other one is doing the opposite. So 3 lugs, the centre one is still attached to the wiper. It's a separate wiper. Both of these circuits are completely separate from each other, but on this side we have the resistive material, and then you have just a straight contact. This is a substrate. It's basically just a track on the board. It's not adding any resistance, or not enough resistance to be important anyway. You can always argue about the whys and wherefores of that. But, so, what this means is that there is a centre detent in this. Where are we? Okay, so I'm centred. Now, if I turn the wiper one way, I'm introducing a whole lot of resistance on this side, but I'm not introducing any resistance on this side. And if I turn it the other way, of course, I'm doing exactly the same thing, but on the other PCB. Now, how do we wire that up? Well, it's actually very, very simple. We have 2 PCBs. We have 6 lugs. And 2 of them are going to be in. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now, one of these is going to be the output on each side, and one of these is going to be the resistance on each side. Now, figuring out which is which does take a multimeter, and I will have to put this thing onto a multimeter to work out what happens between each lug as I'm turning it. But the basic diagram means that 2 of these are going to go to ground, so they can be joined, and a further 2 of these are going to go to the output, so they can be joined. You're literally going in the centre and then a crisscross to get your ground and your output, and That's sort of how you do it. But the question is, which one's going to be output and which one's going to be ground, or vice versa. You got to measure it first. So, multimeter time. Okay, now, the knob is centered, meaning that the wiper is essentially in the center there. Zero resistance across these two lugs. Now, if I turn it anti-clockwise, we introduce some resistance until it overloads and there's simply no signal there. We put it back in the center, and we get 0, and if I turn it clockwise, nothing happens. There is 0 resistance being introduced. So what that means is that when the wiper is centrally located, and the signal's coming in the middle, it's going out with no resistance on that lug and that lug. So those are going to be the outputs, which means that those two are going to go to ground, and then that's all there really is to it. Both pickups will come in the center, we'll bridge across there, we'll bridge across there, we can put that one to ground, and then that's just going to go off to the volume knob. Yeah. It's pretty simple, really. And just because I'm the sort of person that will forget that, I am going to mark these as hot on those two, and then green for ground on these two. There we go. So now all I've got to do is cut some very small pieces of wire and hook it all together. Now, just in practical terms, for making assembly a bit easier, there's a couple of things you can do which are really, really simple. I just got a bit of scrap wood and just drilled the holes in there as a copy of what's in the body. That simply means that I can just pop these in there, it'll hold them in place while I'm soldering everything up. You don't have to worry. I have marked that one as the tone knob. There's a little green dot there. That is in case at some point that happens and I wind up soldering the capacitor to that one. That would be a mistake. Now, the other thing that I've discovered which has absolutely changed my life, and I'm not exaggerating, these are a pair of reversing tweezers. You squeeze them and they open, and that means that you can grip hold of whatever bit of wiring you want to tin the ends of, sit it up there, tin the ends. It's the easiest way to hold a small thing that I've found so far. So, yes, you'll be utilising these. I've got plenty of red wire, plenty of green wire, and yeah, I'm just going to follow my nose basically. Cut a piece, strip it, tin it, attach it, and you just piece it together until it's done. Now that is a completed wiring harness. That's pretty good actually, it only took about 20 minutes. I have used green for ground and red for hot, except the ground wire that I installed in the base was red. So that might get confusing, but I know it's there. The chances are I'm the one who's going to have to fix it when it breaks anyway, so I know what's happening. You will note that I have followed a logical pathway for the ground. It's gone from where the pickups come in, over to there, over to there, over to the output, and from there I'll attach it to the bridge. This is so that you don't get any ground loops or any weird interference things. It can just get a little bit weird. It's best to just follow an orderly path. It's also going to be a bit strange trying to attach the outputs from the pickups to the centre pins of that pot. I think I might have to solder them on before I install them, just so I can reach that one a bit more easier, because it's going to be a bit rough trying to solder down in between these wires. I tried to leave myself a little bit of room to work in there, but probably not enough. But yes, it is time to shield the cavity, and then I can install all of this. And again, I probably should have shielded this before poking these wires through, because that's going to make things a little bit tricky for me. And again, I really wish that was green, because that's a ground wire. Yeah, I think, if anything, the common theme of this instrument is me getting ahead of myself. Now the moment of truth. Let's actually plug it in. It's an extremely crispy cable, this one. Let's just see if it does anything. So that's on full. That's in the center. Tone's on full. We got anything? Yeah, we do. Interesting. Right. I think that's back pickup only. Whoa, that's loud. That's a mighty powerful pickup. Front pickup only. Right. Tone off. Both pickups. That's kind of weird. That's an awful noise, but everything's working. Right, I need to get a jack plate happening, and then, oh yeah, some strings would be nice, which means tuner and nut as well. Right, the home stretch. We're on the home stretch. And here it is! My goodness me, what a thing this turned out to be. I sort of had to rush a couple of little bits right at the end simply because I only have 12 hours of holiday left. So I just really had to push to get this thing over the line, including just pulling an old nut out of the pile and just widening the slots a little bit, and the world's ugliest jack plate. And it actually sounds half decent as well. This is the neck pickup. And if we put the pickup selector halfway, and all the way onto the bridge, yeah, there's some versatility there. Playing chords on the thing is a little bit interesting because I'm not really a guitarist. I've kind of got my own way of getting around on a guitar, and like it's a unique style, but it's not what I would call, in the traditional sense, good. But nevertheless, some chords actually do sound quite good if you play sort of up a bit. Because, if you try and play an open chord down here, nah. But little jazzy things up here, things like that, it works quite well. And I've found you can actually get a fairly respectable bass tone out of it just with a bit of palm muting. Like, that's pretty useful. But really, the true value in this instrument lies in the fact that it doesn't really fit into any category nicely, and it is going to bust you out of your rut. I've had this thing playing for less than 24 hours, and I've already written about 4 pieces of music on it. Like, it's like, it just forces you to play different, it forces you to think differently about what you're doing, you're getting sounds that you can't get anywhere else. Like, it's actually quite remarkable. Highly recommended. I probably wouldn't go on stage with it, but as a writing tool, yeah. Which, of course, brings us to the big song at the end of the series. I love doing these. This time I've kind of gone all out. Because I can't really play guitar properly, I have to kind of piece it together in sections. So this is not a one-take wonder. This is multiple overdubs. I've done a full production, including, but not limited to, palm muting, Tube Screamer Deluxe pedal, Vox AC4, and a Tube Screamer all-tube amp. Yes, I've stacked Tube Screamers. I had fun. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed putting it together. It was an interesting few hours of my life making that. But not as many hours as I spent building this thing. I'm going to go ahead and say time well spent. And it was never a certain thing either. It could have been a total disaster. Right from the very original design being wrong and having to redo that, all the way through I've been second guessing everything that's gone into this. But I think you'll agree, it's a bit of alright. So, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. And I'll be back with something else very, very soon. Cheers.